Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Gajasya Sundarasya Pranata Bhayaharaha Parvati Nandanosau Kshiprakshema Pradata Sakalanuta Janan Tarako Vignarajaha Lokesho Atharva Shirsha Pratita Gunaganas Suprasannas Sumanyo Mooladharastha Devo Muninata Charano Mangalam Dedishotu Laksha Sindura Varnam Suravara Namitam Modakair Moditasyam Haste Dantam Dadanam Himakara Sadrisham Tejasogram Trinetram Dakshe Ratnaksha Sutram Varavara Shudaram Sakhu Simhasanastham Gangeyam Raudramurtim Tripuravadharam Vignabhaksham Namami Gauriputram Trinetram Gajamukhasahitam Nagayajnopavitam Patmaksham Sarvabhaksham Sakalajannutam Sarvagandharvapujyam Sampurna Bhalachandram Varadamatibalam Handrukam Chasuranam Herambam Adidevam Ganapati Mamalam Siddhidataramide Vignesham Vishwavandyam Suvipalasayasam Lokaraksha Pradaksham Sakshat Sarvapadasu Prasamana Sumatim Parvati Pranasunam Prayas Sarvasurendrai Sasura Muniganaihi Sadhagai Pujyamanam Karunyena Antaraya Amita Bhayan Shamanam Vignarajam Namami Uchir Brahmanda Khanda Dvidiya Sahacharam Kumbhayugmam Dadhanaha Prenkhan Nagari Paksha Pradipata Vigata Srotra Tala Bhiramaha Devya Shambho Rapatyam Bhujagapati Tanum Svardhi Vardishnu Hastatrailo Kyascharya Murtihi Sabhavatu Sadatam Bhudaye Kunjarasyaha Bibhrat Panja Mukhani Yoya Mudita Swatandriya Matratmana Shakter Vaibhavada Para Pradihada Dvaitakhya Vignavyaya Eki Bhuta Mukha Sakarana Gana Anukarina Tejasa Devas Samprati Bhasatam Mayi Yatha Tattvam Ganadhishwaraha Devam Sthulatanum Gajendra Lambodaram Sundaram Vignesham Madagandha Lola Madhupavyalola Gandasthalam Dantaghada Vidarita Hita Janam Sindura Shobhakaram Vande Shaila Suta Sutam Ganapatim Siddhipradam Kamadam Gajavadanam Ajindyam Tikshnadam Shtram Ganesham Brihadudaramashesham Bhutarajam Puranam Amaravarasupujyam Raktavarnam Dharesham Pashupati Sutamisham Vignarajam Namami Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Satchidananda Rupaya Krishnaya Klishtakarine Namo Vedanta Vedyaya Gurave Buddhi Sakshine Sri Ganesha Sharada Gurubhyo Namaha Shivaya Gurave Namaha Eyatma Samprasidati. That is what we discussed in the last session. Yaya Bhaktya Atma Manaha Samyageva Prasidati. Why so? Bhaktyam Satyam Kama Malinya Abhave Manaprasadatvam. So with loving devotion, the blemishes of unbridled desires are restrained. And having attained such a mind that is prasannam or pleased and therefore is available to be exposed to the Sravanam, to the teaching of Bhagavatam. This was discussed in the last session. Now in the next verse, Suta says – that it is but only a matter of time that jnanam or knowledge shall manifest in such a mind. Let us look at that verse, the 7th verse. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayat Ahaitukam. The Padacheda would be Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yat Ahaitukam. And the Anvaya would be Bhagavati Vasudeve Prayojitaha Bhakti Yogaha Ashu Vairagyam Janayati Yat Ahayutukam Tat Jnanam Janayati. So Vasudeva towards Krishna, Bhagavati who is Bhagavan, Bhakti Yogaha the relationship through devotional service, Prayojitaha being employed, Janayati it causes, it produces. It's called Nijanta, causative. Janayati, it produces. When Ashu, immediately, very soon, what does it produce? Vairagyam, detachment. Jnanam, knowledge. Cha, and Yat, that which Ahaitukam is causeless, not inferable with reason or Shushka Tarka. So, loyal devotion applied to Sri Vasudeva, Sri Krishna, immediately generates Vairagyam or non-attachment, which indeed leads to Ahayutukam Jnanam, causeless knowledge. The object or cause of that kind of knowledge is Vasudeva. So, with no ulterior motive like wealth, etc., bhakti is pursued as an end in itself, that which does not result in anything but devotion. And such knowledge is not inferable by Shushka Tarka, by logic, but is generated directly by the grace, by realization. And it is free from unnecessary arguments, and therefore it is derived from the Upanishads or from Bhagavatam. So a relationship that is established with Bhagavan Vasudeva, Sri Krishna, through devotion, very soon awakens dispassion and immediate knowledge of the self. By this cause-effect relationship, it is pointed out that the loving devotion towards Krishna is the cause of aparoksha jnanam, of knowledge, immediate knowledge. Now here Sridhara raises an objection and gives the answer. The objection he raises is that you are presenting this bhakti or devotion as the cause of knowledge. But the Upanishads state that the learned of the olden days, the Maharshis, they wish to know this Atma, the self, by performing dharma. Such as, what is dharma? The study of the Vedas. This is what he quotes, Sridhara Swami. Yajnena danena tapasa anashakena. Yajnena through sacrifices, danena through gifts, through charity, and tapasa through austerity. They seek, through this dharma, they seek knowledge. This is in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, 4th chapter, 4th Brahmana, the 22nd mantra. It is quoted by Sridhara to support that dharma or an ethical Vedic lifestyle indeed seems to be the cause of jnanam or knowledge as per as the Vedas. Now, how come you are saying that bhakti or devotion is the cause of knowledge? The answer is, we are not discrediting dharma, but only through bhakti Bhakti Dwara, that's what Sridhara writes. Meaning, bhakti or devotion is an auxiliary, a secondary cause, which generates knowledge. In other words, dharma alone, without bhakti, cannot create knowledge. Let us see what Sridhara says. Nanu tam etam vedanuvachanena brahmanaha vividishanti yajnena danena tapasa anesikena ityadi. Shrutibhyaha dharmasya jnana angatvam prasiddham tat kuto bhakti hedutvam uchyate. That is the question he raised. And the answer is Satyam Tattu Bhakti Dwarena. So he says Bhakti Dwara Jnanam is caused. Here Bhakti is presented as the cause of Vairagyam and then Jnanam, which blooms when Bhakti rises in the devotee's mind. So what is this Vairagyam or dispassion? The Adhyatma Upanishad in the 41st verse, it defines what is the Vairagyasya Avadhi, the limit of Vairagyam. Vasana anudayo bhogye Vairagyasya tadavadhihi. When the rising of the desires for the object of senses has ceased, even in the presence of bhogya or pleasurable sense objects, then it is to be known that dispassion or vairagya has been achieved. So at that point, the mind has got upeksha bhava or indifference accompanied with anadara or absence of over assessment regarding the worthiness of the objects of pleasure and the thinking that the object will provide unbridled pleasure forever. And in Vairagya, there is no appearance of attraction or raga or repulsion or dvesha towards any object or situations. The Virakta mind, the mind which has got Vairagyam, is neither disturbed by the desirable nor the undesirable. As he says in the Gita, Na prahirshyet priyam prapya nodvijet prapya cha priyam. The mind does not become overexcited or dejected. It is not unhappy with the undesirable, and it is not elated by the desirable. Why? For the wise person, there is only fullness, as all that is here is Ishvara Srishti. And the Virakta mind perceives the universe this way because it is sthiraha, it is firmly rooted in the knowledge of Krishna, in Krishna Bhava. Such a Virakta mind is mature due to its blooming relationship with Sri Krishna. It is gradually growing out of Nishiddha Karma owing to its maturity due to Viveka. Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. Remaining here in this world and by darshanam of doshas or understanding the limitation of indriya sukham, the pleasure derived from sense objects. How by dosha darshanam this vairagyam is developed. By experiencing the mortality of the near and dear ones directly, that is of close relatives or indirectly of friends or accomplices, then also vairagyam could happen. But mostly such vairagyam is called as Smashana Vairagyam, and it is very short-lived. This Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi experience, Jara or old age, is very ideal for developing Vairagyam. Death may not give Vairagyam because it's a very short-lived experience. And dosha anudarshanam, many doshas of the sense objects can be recognized because they lead to unpleasant results. Dosha, dukkha anubandhi, and it is anityam, and it is very short-lived. Even the best object, even the best relationship will wither away one day. And when this pleasure ends, there will be a feeling of emptiness. So it is better to prepare the mind. Sometimes even the intellectual understanding is not good enough because vasanas, the old vasanas make the mind hanker for these pursuits. That capability is gained only through vairagya, to manage the mind with willpower. When the mind habitually rushes towards sense pleasures because of old vasanas. Generally, vairagyam is very hard for the ordinary mind without bhakti because the sense of insecurity is so high that at the drop of the hat it wants to pursue an escape route. Even thinking of leaving things behind is difficult. That is why bhakti dwara dharma can help. Dharma anushtanam with bhakti means performing of these yajnas. In the Pancha Mahayajna, like Brahma Yajna, etc., Bhagavata Sravanam itself is Brahma Yajna. That is why when we perform Brahma Yajna, they say, Itihasa Puranam Tarpayami. I propitiate the Itihasas, the Puranas. The other yajnas, such as Devapitra yajnas, are performed with the intent of getting higher loka. Therefore, in those cases, Dharma Anusthana is transformed as Sanchita Punya. And those Punyam you can indeed transform into Vairagyam. So by performing Ishvara Aradhanam, one can seek Vairagyam. That is why we have this prayer, Jnana Vairagya Siddhyartham. I worship thee for Jnana and Vairagya. Thereupon, with Vairagya Siddhi, with such dispassion, and by the grace of Antaryami, the vasanas, the impressions of all ignorance is erased. Then the Swarupa Ajnanam, or the self-ignorance, is removed by the knowledge of self. No, not by any other method, na anyah pantha vidyate, because jnanam and ajnanam are pole apart like day and night. And at the arrival of sun, darkness will go away. It has to go away. As he says in the Gita 10th chapter 11th verse, Tesham evanukampartham ahamajnanajam tamaha nashayamyatma bhavastho jnanadipena bhasvata. Showing them special karuna, special anukampa, grace, I, as Antaryami, dwelling in their hearts, destroy the darkness born of ignorance, jnana deepena, with the shining lamp of knowledge. So the gaining of this knowledge leads to ananda avapti, or unsullied, unmixed joy, along with dukkha dhvamsa, the destruction of all pains and sorrows and sufferings. So the most direct method is jnanam, swaswarupa jnanam. Sridhara does not want to condemn karma. That is why he is suggesting bhakti as a dwaram. Both of them are important. They serve in paving way for the knowledge. And in that, Bhagavatam, Shastra, Guru, Upadesha, that alone is the sadhanam or the means. Here in the Panchadashi, they talk about 7 stages before attaining knowledge. Ajnanam avritis tadvat vikshepascha parokshadhihi aparokshamati shoka mokshas triptirnirankusha. So these are the 7 stages the jiva undergoes on the way to attaining knowledge. Number first is the awareness of one's ignorance, and then obstruction or covering, avritihi, and then vikshepa, distraction, you get to that stage, and then parokshadihi, bookish knowledge, indirect knowledge, shastra jnanam, and then aparokshadihi, aprokshamadihi, the direct knowledge. That is what you get bhakti dwara. And after that, what happens? Shoka mokshas triptir nirankusha. Shoka moksha means freedom from shokam, freedom from grief, worldly grief. And then nirankusha triptihi, satisfaction, unrestricted bliss. So these are the 7 stages. Sapta avastha ime santi chita bhasasya tasyamo bandha mokshau stito tatra tisra bandha krita smrtaha. So the Chidabhasa or the Jiva or the reflected consciousness, the reflected self or Jiva is affected by these 7 stages. They are the cause of bondage and also for freedom, release. So bondage and release, these two are included in these 7 avasthas. The first 3 of them are described as causing bondage. That is Ajnanam, Avritihi and Vikshepa. Ajnanam is ignorance, Avriti is obstruction or covering, and Vikshepa is distraction of the mind. So these 7 stages are the ones that Jiva or the reflected self undergoes on the way to knowledge. A person who identifies with his ego, he thinks that I am very limited, I am only this much. And because of that, he concludes, I don't know, I do not know. Nothing more is known about oneself than the limited knowledge he has. So this ignorance, because of which the ego is there, is destroyed by jnanam, which is the result of Bhagavata Sravanam or listening to the narratives of Sri Krishna. Knowledge is the only way to destroy ignorance about the self. The Shabda Pramanam gained through Sravanam, the knowledge in the form of words employed by Bhagavatam, that destroys the ego because you are not really using them. You are just letting yourself to be used by exposing yourself to the vision revealed by Bhagavatam, revealed by the words of Bhagavatam. In fact, you are so exposed to this darshanam or sudarshanam, which is an astra or a weapon used by Sri Krishna. He uses this to destroy the egoistic asuras, the asura vrittis. Similarly, there is a statement, Asina tattvamasina chinat maharanyam asina tattvamasina chinat. So Asi means a sword. So the Shastra, using the sword, called Tattvamasi, the Asi called Tattvamasi, the sword called the statement Tattvamasi, you are that truth, it cuts your ego. That statement comes out like a sharp sword and cuts the exposed ego, causing its destruction. That is when Jnanam can manifest. And when the sword of Tattvamasi of this Upanishad Vakya is employed against the unveiled ego, it goes away. Thus, you need not do anything except present unconditionally yourself to Bhagavata Sravanam. the teaching, which is Sri Krishna himself. Srimad Bhagavatham Sakshat Pratyaksha Krishna Evahi. So surrendering oneself to the teaching is indeed allowing oneself to pramana or the shastram do its function. It comes from the outside and passes through your ears and enters your heart and destroys the ego, which is the seat of all this problem. For this, no action is required of you. You just expose yourself to Sravanam, to the Pramana, with Shraddha, with faith and Bhakti, with the attitude of loving devotion and surrender to that Pramana, which will result in Jnanam. That is why we have a Visheshana, an adjective at the fag end of the verse. The last word. Jnanam yad ahaitukam. So Sridhara writes, Sushka tarkadi agocharam. This jnanam is not available for Shushka tarka. Shushka tarka means egocentric arguments. The ego does not want to let it go. And then what is that? Aupanishadam ityarthaha. The jnanam which is born of Upanishad, which indeed is the one and only pramana for jnanam or self-knowledge. Swasti prajabhyah paripalayantam nyayena margena mahim mahisha go brahmanebhyah shubhamastu nityam loka samasta sukhino bhavantu sarve bhavantu sukhinah sarve santu niramaya sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.